International manufacturing and engineering company DCD has called on the government to urgently announce its local nuclear content threshold. DCD's warned that uncertainty puts the potential jobs the sector could create at risk. And MD of DCD, Rob King, joins us now in studio. Rob, thanks very much for coming through. Rob, I suppose what is the challenge here for local component manufacturers in the nuclear sector? Is it that we don't actually know what is happening with the government's nuclear policy, or is this threshold for local manufacturers really the key issue?
For once, Julieta, the government's actually been quite consistent. And I mean, just about every official you speak to in the Department of Energy tells us they are going to proceed with the nuclear program. So that's the good news. I think for us the real challenge is about, so what is it that we can do as a country, and if we want to do anything locally, how do we go about doing that? And I think our experience in the renewable energy for that program, which is an excellent program, which is really rolled out very well, has shown us until government creates certainty around what makes a bid viable in terms of local content, our engagement with the international world of the original equipment manufacturers is rather muted. So our view is that the sooner we get to real conversations, which requires government being very firm to say, your bid will be considered, Mr. Vendor, if you have a minimum local content in it, otherwise we don't consider it. That brings us into the game as local manufacturers.
Well, we just had Fred McMahon talking about uncertainty as the biggest risk. Stephen, I don't know if you want to...
Yeah, I mean, the government has pointed to having a 23% nuclear component to the energy mix, that's according to the integrated resource plan, and I think that's by 2036 or something like that. Is that not enough certainty to start working on in the meantime?
Well, that tells us what our energy mix is going to be. But how much of those components are going to be supplied locally is the real question. The nice thing about that, that's roughly 9,600 megawatts of nuclear power, which will suggest roughly 5 nuclear power stations over that period of time. Now you can create an industry around that. And I think once we know what it is that we can do in that, I think then we can start playing as a local manufacturer. But it's not just ourselves. There's a whole industry out there that actually has the capacity to do so.
What sort of threshold would you think is feasible to create a South African industry and to actually create jobs within a local nuclear manufacturing sector?
Julieta, we mustn't forget our past. We as DCD have delivered about 80% of the heavy engineering components for coal-fired power stations, all 22 of them. So that's our past. So if we look at it right now, the Nuclear Industries Association of South Africa, in collaboration with Eskom, have been investigating what is possible. And the number of 59% is currently on the table as what is possible, but it will employ the entire industry, which does suggest that we need to think very carefully about that. But 59%, if you're saying, well, if it's the entire industry, do we back away from that? Well, the procurement process for a nuclear power station is going to take us 2 to 3 years in any case. But if we're only going to start in the procurement process to talk about how we create local content, that's too late. So we should really be getting government's intention out there as to what they think is a realistic number, and let's get on with it.
Because are you worried that, for example, international manufacturers, I don't know, Chinese suppliers, for example, could come in and swamp the market and basically push out the local guys?
Well, our current discussions with the vendors are quite muted in the sense that they're trying to tell us what we can't do. Which makes life very difficult because we're telling them what we can do. And it also varies from a vendor to vendor. But I think our biggest challenge is going to be, particularly if those vendors come with their own finance, I think it's going to come with their own government's requirement. We will assist you with funding, but we want to see French or Chinese or Korean local content as well. So I think we have to lobby our government in terms of trying to make sure that there's a strong representation from the local industry and what we can do.
I mean, the Nuclear Industry Association has been engaging with the DTI and the Department of Energy. What's come out of those talks so far?
Well, Stephen, the 59% really only came out of a conference that was held about 2 weeks ago. So now the discussions start. And I think one has to recognize the challenge that government itself has. Because I think some of the vendors, just in what I've described to you, will look at that 59% and say, that's maybe not that attractive to me, and might back away from the program. So this is quite this is a government walking a tightrope. Pressure from ourselves about creating jobs. And what am I talking about? I've got a heavy engineering facility that employs roughly 400 people at the moment. In a nuclear environment, it can employ 7,000 people.
Well, you have to start getting skills
Absolutely.
and training.
Absolutely, and that's what we're calling for. And it was no more prominent than at the NIASA conference when all of us, ourselves, Avenge, Group 5, all of us was talking about what it is that we could do. And there was a group of young black engineers, women in nuclear, as well as local businesses in the Eastern Cape, and saying, what about us? And I can't engage with those people unless I know what it is that I'm going to be doing. And I think for us, that's where we really need to get the conversations. The sooner, even if it's a rumor that there's 40%, I'll get the guys, or 59%, the guys will start talking to us about what is possible.
Yeah. Okay, Rob, we have to leave it there, but good luck, and hopefully we have a follow-up interview with you on this, and hopefully there is some clarity soon. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you,
That's Rob King, he's Managing Director of DCD.